We have traveled many miles to get here. We are in Rocklin, California, here at the rather unusual tomb of Joel Parker Whitney. He was a very rich man who settled here way back in the 1880s. He's buried there with members of his family. We'll tell you all about it on this episode of History Hunters. Now, to get to the Whitney Pyramid Tomb, what you need to do is drive to Monument Park, a beautiful section of Rocklin, and there's a trail that leads from this park to the tomb site, and it's not very far, just down the hill a little bit, right next to the golf course. So this is how you get in. There's a gate here. Looks like they did their best to lock the bottom, but there's an easy entrance. And then right inside the gate here is a plaque that was an Eagle Scout project that talks about this being the pyramid. Joel Parker Whitney constructed this stone wall enclosure, the fort, in the mid-1800s. Later in the 1900s, and the enclosure became a burial tomb. His home, the Oaks, was located about a half mile west of here. And there's some pictures. They're kind of hard to see. But there's Mr. Whitney playing croquet or golf. There's a stone bridge there, many stone bridges he built throughout this area. There's a picture of him up there, sitting in his chair, donated by the third graders of Rocklin School District in 2004. And apparently he raised the California Raisin, Rocklin, California, the Whitney brand. Early bird navel oranges, Woodpecker brand, Whitney Estates, Orange Groves. So this details the Monument Park's here, and then the house that he lived in, the Oaks home site, was way up there. It was an Eagle Scout project by Mr. Rob Shearer, 2006. So thank you, Rob, for doing this. It helps us to identify the history around here. This little short walk away here is the tomb. Strange pyramid tomb for an early California settler, a very successful settler. He made a great fortune, bought up 20,000 acres around here, built a beautiful house, 20 rooms. It no longer exists. Kind of ironic that there's a dead limb hanging out over a tomb. This might be a scary place at Halloween. Right over here we have the Indian grinding holes. As you can see here, Indians used to populate this area, and they would grind their acorn into flour right here, all over this rock here. So you got some Native American history. This burial spot is right along a golf course. And as you can see, some nice homes over here. This fort was built by Joel Parker Whitney for his grandchildren, a place to play. Right up here are some more grinding holes. Several members of the family are buried here. Famous photographer Ansel Adams came out here in 1962. He took pictures of this tomb. He also took pictures of some of the rock bridges that Mr. Whitney built throughout his property. This tomb is near the 11th green of the Whitney Oaks golf course. In the mid-1880s, Joel Parker Whitney set aside 40 acres of his 20,000-acre Spring Valley Ranch for a family estate, including a ranch and a 20-room, 3-story mansion known as the Oaks. It was at the end of Knoll Court in the Mansion Oaks neighborhood of Rocklin. The Horseshoe Cattle Company demolished it in the early 1950s to save taxes. In fact, there's a plaque in front of the residence where it once was on Knoll Court. Mr. Whitney arrived in California in 1852 with gold mining dreams, and he made a fortune without prospecting a single nugget. This tomb is about 15 feet high and constructed of granite blocks with a marbled lined interior. While it may seem odd that there's a tomb here in the middle of a golf course area, keep in mind that Mr. Whitney owned thousands of acres around this spot. In the last 110 years, there's been a lot of development in California. There's a lot of luxury homes here. There's golf courses here. It's a beautiful spot. In fact, Mr. Whitney, on his way to Auburn, when he was trying to mine the first time he went up there, he stopped in this area and thought it was the most beautiful place that he'd ever seen, so he decided that he was going to build an estate here one day. When he arrived in Auburn, he found the mining camps were lawless, they were rowdy. Finding gold was very difficult, so he decided to go back east. He brought out supplies and he sold them to the miners, and he made a great fortune doing that. A lot of people did that. They found out that, it was very difficult to find gold, so they would sell provisions to the miners and get rich that way. I know Charles Weber was that way in Stockton as well. Now there's an iron door that has been put on here, and it looks like there's a padlock underneath, but you can actually enter that. Mr. Whitney's kids must have been pretty fortunate to have such a rolling estate like this with little... Hey, there's a lizard! What do you think of the tomb?
It's a tomb.
It's a tomb with dead people in it?
It's not that, apparently.
I think there's at least 3 other family members of his in there.
It remains unclear to us how many folks are actually buried within the tomb and whether they are bodies or remains. Some reports say 23 members of the family. We are confident, however, that someone will weigh in and give us some additional information. It is fairly certain that the remains of Joel and his wife Lucy are here, as well as their 3 children, Joel, Vincent, and Helen Burrell. There is a dispute about the origins of this tomb. Some say that Whitney created this tomb for himself in his declining years. However, there's a note in Whitney's diary written by son Vincent that indicates Vincent ordered the tomb to be built after his father's death. Curiously, there are 3 interments of people who died more than 20 years before Whitney, that of his mother and father and one of his sisters.
I've heard 2 versions of Mr. Whitney's burial here. Some say that his remains are here, and others say that his body's here. It looks like there was a gate here at one time, because there's latches here. And there's a hinge. There was a gate here.
It's certain that the remains of daughter Helen Burrell are inside this crypt. She made the news when she ran off with a Harvard football player against her parents' wishes. She must have gotten back in their good graces because in 1906 she was featured on the cover of Sunset magazine, showing off some of the fruit grown on her father's ranch. The pyramid shape probably resulted from Whitney's belief in pyramidology, the belief that pyramids hold magical powers, including the power to bestow reincarnation.
Pyramids, if he's interested in preserving his body for the afterlife, like Egyptians and mummification and stuff like that, well, they would put the innards, like the heart and different organs, in canopic jars.
You know about that?
I know about that.
What's a canopic jar?
A canopic jar?
Yeah.
I think I'm saying it right. Is jars, when they mummify somebody, they take the organs out and they put them in the jars, and I think it has something to do with once they pass over into the afterlife, they're able to reassemble themselves. I don't even know if that part's true because it's been a while since I've read up on it, but yes, the canopic jar part is true. What they do with it in the afterlife, I don't know. But mummification was done so that you can identify your body when you return for it. There you go.
Interesting. Now this fort is covered with berry vines on one side. I'm sure at one time of the year you'd be able to eat the berries off of here.
For decades, this family tomb has been a magnet for people who have disrespected and vandalized this sacred site and engaged in all sorts of mischief. Based on photographs taken long ago of the so-called fort, we're certain that people, not time, have knocked over some of the stones from the wall structure.
I just think those are so cool. It's evidence of Indians who lived long, long ago.
Some research that I did indicated that Josh inherited the 20,000-acre ranch from his father, who was a 7th-generation Bostonian who followed his sons to California in 1855. Joel, sometimes named Josh, received the property when his father died in 1872. The Spring Valley Ranch was so large that Whitney boasted that he could ride horseback all day and never leave his property. For more than 50 years, he raised sheep on this property. He was one of the first to grow oranges in Northern California, and it's said that the first rail car load of raisins ever shipped from California came from Whitney's estate.
I think Mr. Whitney represents a completely different era than we have today, where opportunities were great and fast, and just depending on how hard you worked, you could own hundreds of thousands of acres. And in some instances, some people were granted land in early days of California, especially when the Mexican government had control over California. We'll never see towns like that again. Nowadays, you spend a great fortune just to buy a little lot and a nice home here in California. The home prices are crazy. And just a note, on our way here, gas prices, May of 2022, was like $5.80. That's about the cheapest gas you see. On the way in, we saw gas prices at Chevron that were about $6.12 a gallon. So the rest of the country, I don't think pays nearly that. Nestled among these oak trees are some really beautiful houses. Of course, we are in a golf course area, and it's just really beautiful in here. Beautiful part of California. Of course, it gets very hot here. Summertime gets very hot. Okay, so we drove about 4 minutes up the hill here to Knoll Court. It is the location where the Whitney Mansion was located. And fortunately for us, there's a plaque that designates where it was, and it's right up here. Right where this beautiful house is was the Whitney Mansion, and it's gone. But a beautiful house right down here. We have a plaque that talks about the oak that was right here. Very hard to read. Residence of J. Parker Whitney from 1885 to 1958. That's when they tore this down. I think it's pretty cool though that they have a monument here designating where the house was. Very cool. Everything has changed. It's just incredible how this looks nothing like it used to back in the day. Now, of course, there were no trees. And when Mr. Whitney lived here, they said he could look out his window in the back and see the state capitol far off in the distance. And now there's so many trees in Rocklin area that you cannot imagine ever doing that today. Very nice neighborhood. But think, Mr. Whitney did not die here. He died at Del Monte Hotel in Monterey. Apparently people in the valley love to go to the coast because that's how you beat the summer heat.
A curved driveway led to the Oaks, a 20-room mansion overlooking the ranch estates. The opulent lifestyle of the Whitneys is reflected in these photographs of the interior of the mansion. This house was occupied by Joel, his wife Lucy, and their 3 small children. The mansion was constructed entirely of redwood except for the floors. Every bedroom had a fireplace faced with expensive tile, and every room on the first floor, except for the kitchen and the pantries, had a fireplace. The mansion faced the southeast with a view of the ranch's headquarters, which were near today's Granite Oaks Middle School. The 4-acre grounds included stables, a carriage house, servants' quarters, tennis courts, and a dog run for Whitney's greyhounds. Later, Whitney's son Vincent built a golf course on the plain and the slopes below. The mansion fell into disuse after the death of Whitney's youngest child, Helen Burrell Whitney Blaine, in 1935. And the property reverted to animal pasture as Whitney's family gradually sold off the ranch in the 1940s.
So we pulled over here by this park. Sarah spotted I spotted a squirrel for her. I think she's contemplating getting out to feed it, but
I won't be able to get near it enough to feed it, likely.
he probably wouldn't. But there's a series of beautiful parks very close to the Knoll Court that we just visited. This bridge here is in the park. It's one of the 12 bridges that Mr. Whitney built in the 1880s. He spent about $6,800 building these bridges made out of granite. And the reason he liked these bridges is because he used to go vacation in England and he saw these bridges over there and he thought he would bring a little of the English countryside here to Northern California. This is one of the surviving bridges. Actually, I think all of the bridges are surviving. but there are little creeks running all over his property. Keep in mind he owned about 20,000 acres here in the Rocklin area, northeast of Sacramento. And in the springtime, these streams really ran pretty wild. It almost looks like they cut the stone just like they would in Yosemite National Park. You see a lot of bridges like this in Yosemite where they chiseled, there's the chisel marks to break off the stone and form it the way you want it to. Beautiful bridge. Ansel Adams was taken by these bridges as well. In fact, when he came here in 1962, he photographed the one in Clover, I believe Clover Park, something like that. But this would have been a creek running through the property. A lot of oaks around here as well. I would say the predominant tree here that's native of these beautiful oak trees. So I have a little more information on these bridges for you. They were built between 1883 and 1888. At the same time he was building the Oaks, his mansion, not too far. I mean, right up the hill. He probably could have looked down and seen this bridge from his house. That's how close we are. If you look right there, you'll see the holes that they drilled for that piece of rock there. I'm sure there was a rock quarry pretty close by to create all this beautiful stone, which is in itself an art. Imagine the strength of that arch is that each stone kind of rests on each other. That's the beauty of the arch. It's one of the most powerful and strong designs for a building. I decided to come over here to the city of Rocklin, Clover Valley Park, because one of the biggest bridges that Mr. Whitney built is located here. But check this out. This is probably a piece of the rock, perhaps the most picturesque of the bridges that Mr. Whitney built is up here. He built 12 bridges. This was built mid-1880s. I have a feeling this is the bridge. Mr. Ansel Adams photographed this bridge back in 1962. Go take a look at it down here. There it is. The biggest of Mr. Whitney's bridges, built in 1885-ish. And it's still here. That's awesome. This is a pretty awesome bridge. It stood the test of time. Boy, I can say this about Rocklin. They sure do value their parks. There's a lot of nice green space around here. Nice creek here. And then there's the stone bridge right over there. You know, say what you want about the people who lived way back. I think in some respects they were pretty sophisticated for the age, because the stuff that they were able to accomplish without the technology that we have today, it's amazing. The stonemasons, I have total respect for them. Like I've said in some of my cemetery videos, just the ornate carvings that were done in stone. I can't imagine how they did those things. So I want to thank you for joining us here in Rocklin to learn a little bit more about one of California's very inventive, very imaginative, and very wealthy pioneers. As always, I would appreciate hearing your comments about what you saw today. Maybe if you have some input. Also, if you give us a thumbs up, we would really appreciate that as well. Thank you so much.